Hello. Good morning, Joey. Uh, Hopefully, as long as I can email this to you, this will be the first entry into the rerun of the 20 book challenge. I'll be going back, of course, and reading the other ones back over. But I started with a different book this time. And what it is this book here, The Richest Man in Babylon. So it was written by George S. Clayton, and it is a very short story, which helped me personally read through it because not only did I find it intriguing in terms of what it had to say, but also I personally don't enjoy reading very much, so it being short and to the point helped me get through it. And I know that enjoying reading is a skill that you build up, so a shorter book like this was a good starting point for getting back on track doing these books. And I will be looking through the book at certain times as I'm talking about it because I'm awful with names, and there is a lot of names in this book, and uh, it will be a little bit difficult to say all of them. uh, they're very old names that you don't see too often, and also there's certain passages that I may want to read and then build off of it. So essentially, Richest Man in Babylon is a bunch of short stories that all are themed around Arcad or his laws of becoming a wealthy person, a person of means. The book is pretty interesting in terms of the older form of English that it's written in. It made it to where I was having a bit of fun trying to piece together multiple different sentences, trying to figure out what was being said, and using context clues to learn new words, which I enjoyed quite a bit. But where we start off in terms of the first story is with a character called Dabasir, who is a chariot maker, and he sits slumped across the wall of his house, pondering in thought because he thinks, well, I'm very talented at what I do. However, I don't seem to really be able to keep my money. I'm always struggling to make ends meet. And then his friend Kobe, who is a bard, a musician, eventually joins him, and they speak on what to do about their situation. And they come to the very wise conclusion that they should probably seek out the person or a person that is extremely well off, someone who actually made it. And so, what this leads to is them finding Arcad, who is the richest man in Babylon, right? And he gives a recounting of himself when he was a stone tablet inscriber, and how he was just barely making ends meet. And one day, a old man had come in who I am failing to remember the name of right now. It was like Killamesh or something. Um, Maybe I'll find that here in a moment. Uh, he sees that he's a man of means, and he, the first time around, makes the man angry that he didn't do the tablets the way he wanted. And so he says, I'll do them to perfection this time if you teach me the way to make money. And so that eventually leads to the man giving him information and then giving him a year to act upon that information. However, I'll effectively come back to what he told him once I get into the 7 laws of fattening your purse, as the book says, because it's essentially pieces of that information. But essentially, the first year he messes up very bad because he trusts one of his friends with he trusts the money that he had been saving up to a friend who thinks that they're going to buy fine jewels from a distant land, and it turns out that they entrusted it to scammers, and so he had to start all over. And the second time around goes a little bit better because he builds back up his savings, and essentially he gives it as an investment and expects returns on it from a metal worker. Um, But what I really want to get to is when essentially there's effectively a whole class that's going to be seeing our COD every single day of this given week, because he's going to come and discuss the different laws of gold on one law of gold on a given day. And so these are the most important things in the book in terms of rereading it, describing it, and imprinting it into your head, right? So the first one is you need to take 10% of your income, 1/10 of it, at the very least, and start putting it off to the side. You're not going to touch it. You're just going to leave it as is. And you are essentially, what you're doing is you are building up a savings that you will eventually be able to turn around for some of the later laws of gold. And so this was it's a very basic idea, but it's something that for some reason I had just never thought to do on my own time. And so it's that was an important thing for me to read, because I do have savings, but I've never put off a certain amount where I'm like, I'm never touching that, right? I haven't done that. And so this book has inspired me to begin doing that. And as you'll see as well, it's also inspired me to start putting off small amounts of money over the course of time to afford something, an allotted amount. And so, and this is a conversation you and I had on the phone before, but it's something that is described here in this book. And so the let me go to the passage. I want to read it real quick for the video. Hold up. Here it is. Okay, so the second law, or the second cure, is going to be control your expenditures. This is something that I am still struggling with. I've been working on it. Essentially, it's saying there are probably, most likely, plenty of things that you're spending money on that you just don't need to, or you're not allotting money as a preparation in for those things that you need, because you need to divvy up your money and have a clear idea of where things are going and what you're going to get out of it at the end of any given transaction or time frame, whatnot. And so that's been part of the reason why I personally have stagnated around the same amount of money for such a long time, because, like, say, going out and eating, I have gone out and eaten a ton. I do it all the time. Whenever I am short on time in the morning and I don't make my my lunch, then I tend to do that. And realistically, the cure for that is make my food at night, just that slight bit of preparation, but I don't always do that. And so that's a very easy example of an expenditure that I need to get under control. All right. The next one is make thy gold multiply. So essentially, this is in reference to thinking of ways that you're able to take the 10% that you've been building up over time and turning it into something more, investing it in ways that are going to result in you getting bigger returns. And essentially, this is going to tie in a lot into the next cure 4. But this in terms of applicability, say for me, for example, essentially what I need to do and what I've started doing is putting off this amount of money that is going to go to starting something greater, right? So say I decided to go into lawn care and say cleaning people's vehicles or whatnot. Well, essentially, you could look at that 10% I'm putting off. I'm not saying this is that as though it's the best example, just merely an example, but take what I've been building and then money I've been putting off for it, and then use that to be able to turn it around and start making more money. However, the way that the book is more describing is as borrowing, as lending, as not borrowing, as lending, investing, stuff like that. Things that I'm not quite as privy to. It takes quite a bit of creativity to just think, to look at things in your surroundings and say, how can I turn this into money? Definitely not a skill that I'm very privy to as of right now, but hopefully over time I'll be able to develop that idea of, okay, how do I turn, say, this plot of land into a profit or something like that, for example. So uh, that's what that one's about. And then the next one is guard your treasures from loss. And essentially, there's a couple of things that this is referring to. It could be talking about the literal loss of your money. Say your house burns down or something and you have nothing but cash, and you don't manage to get it out, for example. That would be extremely bad. But what it's more in reference to is trust people who are who are have distinguished themselves as wise people in a given field that you're interested in turning into a profit. So in Arcad's story, the reason he lost his money the first year around is because he just trusted it to his friend, who I think was just a brickmaker, and he was gonna get these rare jewels from a faraway land, but that's not his profession. He doesn't realistically know very much about what he's doing, and they get scammed for it. So if you want to make money profiting on something, then you should be going for and looking and searching for people that are very distinguished in their field, that people who have made it. And this sort of goes further into just a general thing. A general piece of advice is you should be getting in terms of advice you intend on following, you should be getting it from people who have made it. So if you're getting information from your grandfather who essentially hasn't amounted any sort of wealth for their family and they're just bitter at the world, that's nowhere near as good of a person to take advice from than somebody who has been a successful person in life. So it's not like there isn't still important things to garner in terms of things like, okay, these are pitfalls to avoid, but perhaps you see what I'm getting at, that the people who have made it in terms of the positive sort of action that they give you to follow is what you should be following. So the fifth one is make a profitable investment. This is, I kind of by proxy hit this one a little bit already, but essentially it is talking about the ways in which you decide to go about investing your money and turning it over into a profit. Something that the book will get into later is money lending. Essentially, the idea that you will essentially give someone your gold or your money long enough for them to make a profit within a time frame, and then you will receive more back than what you lended them, but the profits are high enough that they will get profits from it still, and you will as well. But you have to entrust it to people that are competent. So the next one is ensure a future income. And so a really good example of this is what you do. Essentially, it's a passive income, and it makes it to where you you aren't always working, but you are always making money. There's not there's not a gigantic amount of jobs that are like this. Most of them are based on your time and labor that you are at the store, in the shop, whatever it is that you do. Um, and generally, you're not going to be able to push into that sort of passive income unless you're doing something that people are paying you for, like a house or whatnot. But that's how I see this rule, and it doesn't have to be passive income, but it's, I think, the most prominent example. And then the seventh one is increase thy ability to earn. And so the sixth and seventh one kind of go hand in hand with this. This is talking about, well, yes, but no. This one's talking more so about your ability to keep learning, to keep moving forward and learning more things and ways to make money. If you stagnate and say you make $1 million or whatever, and then you just retire and you stop doing what you're doing, yes, you do have $1 million, but you are going to lose the majority, if not all of it. You're not going to live a life of wealth, because similar to a river, money is made to flow, and it's there's nothing wrong with increasing your reservoir, essentially turning your finances into a deep lake, but there are still channels that you should be acquiring water from, or gold, and avenues that it will be expended, right? And so, but that lake being there in the first place means that it's receiving just as much, if not more, and for this analogy, let's say more, than what it is losing. Um, and then there's a couple other stories behind this. There's two that detail going into slavery. One is from, let's see, let me find his name. Um, it's not Davis here. It's a name kind of similar to it. Bonzar. Yeah, so Bonzar essentially racked up a lot of debt with a lot of his friends, people that trusted him, and eventually went into a life working with crooks. And once they were eventually overthrown and caught, he was put into slavery. And the way he dug himself back out is he refused to accept that he had the soul of a slave, and he eventually escaped. But what he did is he started paying off the people that he had essentially screwed over. Um, and then the other one is he got sold into slavery because he was at the game houses, if that makes sense. And he started working diligently. The main thing that to take away from this chapter being how hard he worked to start making his own money, convincing his master that he'll keep a quarter of the things that the money he makes from selling these pastries that he walks around town selling. And it's interesting being able to read something that is effectively letting you look back and look at how slavery was treated. Like, slaves could have a family, a house, and whatnot. The majority of people in Babylon were slaves, but it's really interesting how that used to work. I know that definitely wouldn't fly or work the same in today's time. Not that I'm even remotely implying that it should or need to, but just interesting, because this is clearly, I mean, Babylon is from thousands of years ago. So very interesting to read about how sort of the dynamics, the politics of being a slave work. And he essentially earned his freedom. And the importance of this chapter is the idea that hard work is your best friend. And that's very true. You will impress the people around you. You will you will, and by proxy, they will want to work with you more, which could potentially mean being paid more, opening new opportunities because people want to employ people that work hard. Or if you're not working for other people, if you're just working for yourself, then self employment is going to. Hang on, I think my mom just woke up. Okay, she's not coming. If so, I'll just pause and start recording again after a while. And essentially, it was his hard work that kept him from having to work on the walls, the gigantic walls that defend Babylon. It is soul crushing, literal back breaking work, and essentially they just have trenches of dead slaves that died to exhaustion. Most of these people, however, were criminals who had killed people or had stolen large quantities of things. And so he was able to get out of that situation by putting himself out there to the master and essentially being like, I may not know what you wish of me, but I work extremely hard. I will work extremely hard. And it's only reasonable that somebody would want an employee that works very hard in comparison to one who doesn't. And so that's what that story's mainly about. And so, yeah, there's a couple other stories, but they are generally going over very similar things to what I've already described. If you wish for me to go over them as well, I certainly can. But what I mostly want to focus on with these videos is essentially going, okay, let me take the moral that it's trying to teach me and then relate it to things I need to do or things that I've begun doing due to what I'm reading, and seeing what I can take away in terms of the sort of like the pearls of wisdom, if you will, right? And so there's a chapter in here where they're all sitting around a campfire under the starry sky, and they recount Arcad. Essentially, he was now an older man, and his son, it's a common practice that rich people bestow their riches and their estate to their children. But Arcad went about it a different way, where he said, for 10 years, you will go and try to make something of yourself. And if you succeed, I will grant you my estate. And he did get essentially a little care package, which, not far from everybody gets, his son. And essentially for the first couple of years, he sort of squandered it and lost it. But he eventually comes back to the tablets. He condensed it from 7 to 5 tablets that are essentially the wisdom that he gave his son to constantly look at. And when he reapproached these tablets and tried to really incorporate them into his life is when he started having success and began to make way more money than he started out with, even though he had lost that money over the course of merely a couple of years, over the first 1 or 2 years it was. So yeah, I did really enjoy this book. Reading for me isn't overly fun, but I did enjoy this book due to the complexity of trying to figure out certain words and whatnot. I liked that it was using language that was a little bit more difficult for me to understand, or at least understand initially. And I will be returning to it. It was only in the dying chapters of this book that I thought, oh wait, I should essentially highlight like everything that I'm doing. And so I'm going to be incorporating that now. As of right now, I'm working on the how to win friends and influence people. I'm highlighting a ton of stuff in there. It really does not give much breathing space in terms of just dropping pearls of wisdom for you. And so, yeah, that's how things are going right now. Hope to hear from you and talk about it and whatnot. And Have a nice rest of your morning. This is morning for me. Bye.